From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt. Our co-host Noel is on adventures.
They call me Ben. We are joined with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this stuff they don't want you to know. Matt, do you ever contemplate alternative timelines or alternate timelines? Do you ever think of who you might be and what you might be doing in a universe just to the left of ours?
Yes, I have a similar thing to that. It's a yes, but, which is a weird thing. Shouldn't do yes buts. But my wife and I have this theory that we jumped timelines sometime in 2016. That all of Earth jumped a timeline, and somehow we're in this alternate reality now. Mm-hmm. Where just things are a little bit off of what they were before. And we don't really know, because it's that whole Mandela effect thing where our memories are a little different, but in this timeline, it's all been this way forever.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting argument. It's more common than you might think, especially here in the West. Quite a few people have, on an individual level, floated something like that with me. I guess my timeline question for you and for you listeners today is hinging on these sorts of thought experiments that we have, these Walter Mitty-esque moments where we think, what is my life in this other universe like, where I am an astronaut or where I am a touring percussionist for, I don't know, what's a dream band that people want to play percussion for?
I always knew that you were going to do that one day. I knew it. Dave Matthews Band.
Oh, yeah. I met one of their touring drummers, not the main guy, but I met one of their touring drummers a while back. Really nice guy. That is the end of that story. But the reason I ask is because...
You met Carter?
What's that?
You met Carter?
No, not the main drummer.
Oh, okay.
No, one of the bongo guys.
Oh, yeah, the percussionist. Got it.
Yeah. So... way back in a different version of my own life, I was on track to be an employee of something very much like the company that we are examining today. Thankfully, this is just my opinion, I didn't do it, and my thoughts and prayers go out to whatever Ben Bolin lives in a version of the timeline where the cards fell differently.
And instead, we got into this.
And instead, we ended up doing this, yes. When we think of global powers, we usually think of nations, right? Governments, religions, huge multinational corporations, and so on. And we understand in a very general way how all of these work. You don't need to be a president or prime minister to understand that nations on paper seek to make life better for their citizens, right? On paper. And you don't need to, or maybe a certain segment of their citizenry.
There you go.
You don't need to be a priest, a patriarch, or a pope to understand that religions typically strive to make new converts and spread their teachings, their philosophies.
And save souls.
And save souls. Yeah, depending on the religion. Mm-hmm. While a corporation will work to expand its market share and ultimately its bottom line. And all of these things are fine in theory, right? But none of them are inherently good or evil, which I know can ruffle some feathers, especially when we talk about religion. We're not talking about a specific religion, just the concept. None are inherently good or evil because some nations might improve life for their citizens or some percentage of their population by making things worse for other people in another country or indeed in the same country. And some religions may advocate slavery or death for non-believers. That may be the best way to save their souls, according to some teaching or interpretation thereof. And, as we know, some corporations may wreak tremendous havoc chasing that bottom line and even, ultimately, shoot themselves in the foot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But today's story is about something else entirely. Not a religion, not a nation, perhaps not even really a corporation, at least in the way that we would traditionally think about one of those. Today's episode is about a mysterious consultancy firm called the McKinsey Group. But to those in the know, it's simply called
The Firm.
Ooh, I like that movie with Tom Cruise, right?
Yeah, there's also a
book.
A book, The Firm. There's
Grisham.
Yeah, and there's a documentary about McKinsey called The Firm. So let's look at the history first. Here are the facts. This thing is very, very old. The McKinsey Group was founded in 1926 by a fellow named James O. McKinsey. He was a University of Chicago professor and an expert on what's known as management accounting. He worked his way up from the bottom.
Okay, management accounting. So I guess a manager of sorts? Or I guess in this case, he is a consultant.
High-level accounting, right?
Yeah.
How do we best understand a budget for an organization, right? How do we streamline that budget? How do we grow certain parts of it, and so on? He was born way back in 1889. He grew up in fairly modest means in a 3-room house in the Ozarks. And these kind of humble beginnings are talking points that a lot of companies of this nature love to hit. You know what I mean? Large corporations love to talk about the humble beginnings and therefore the implied genius of their founder, right? This was an extraordinary person, whatever their name is, because through nothing but their own intellect and gumption, they rose to the top.
Yeah, his grip on his bootstraps is very strong.
This is very popular. This is an iteration of the American myth. You know what I mean? So it's no wonder that that's one of the first things you'll read about the founder in any of the official literature.
It is interesting he started as a professor. That fascinates me. Because he's a learned man who's already teaching people something. I feel like this may be just completely naivete on my part, but to be a professor or a teacher of any kind, I feel like there has to be a certain amount of selflessness in somebody. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
Professors are people, Matt. You know, and people have a terrible track record.
Okay,
but which I'm not. I share the same. I share the same bias in many ways because I am one of those people who, like you, I believe, looks up to professors, people who dedicate such a large portion of their life to learning a specific discipline or even a specific subset of a specific discipline, you know?
And then not necessarily using all of that hard work for your own means. You're using it to teach other people to do what you have learned so much about. I don't know. That to me, it speaks to somebody's character, I guess, at a base level.
Yeah, I agree. It also brings us to, this may be a story for a different day, but it brings us to the idea of academic wars of ideology, which are fought in the ivory towers as we record this episode. You know what I mean? What is the nature of humanity? How does that translate philosophically to the best economic model? Things like that, right? People still choose which hill they want to die on in this debate. And it can sound dry and academic, but we have to remember that the same people who are opposing one another in these sorts of things, anywhere from more political philosophy to more economic philosophy, these people end up in the halls of power. They end up making laws, you know what I mean? Or having a very, very strong influence on the laws that are made. So it can seem dry, but at the end of the day, it does impact you and it impacts everyone around you, at least who lives in that government. And sometimes, often people who, at least in the case of the U.S., people who don't have anything to do with the U.S. get impacted by these beliefs. McKinsey's original, I guess, breakout single was the principles of what's called scientific management. He was an early practitioner of this. And this will sound very familiar, understandable to all of us. It's just the detailed study of workflow and the division of labor. So we have X amount of employees, Y amount of task. How do we translate this into the most efficient process, right? Mm-hmm. Which, we're explaining it in a very simple way, but you can see how this becomes incredibly complicated, incredibly quickly. But it turns out McKinsey was really good at it. We all know when we heard that date, 1926, we all know that there was a context. There was a disaster looming on the horizon just a few years after the foundation of the McKinsey Group.
Yeah, it's not really a great time to found something.
Right. The Great Depression occurred.
But here's the deal. Under McKinsey's leadership, this group, this organization that he created, it didn't just survive the Depression. It didn't just make it through. This sucker thrived. When the founder, James O. McKinsey, died in 1937, a gentleman named Marvin Bower took the firm, and he took it basically beyond what James had been able to take it to. Some would say glory over the next 30 years. In part, though, this is part of an obsession with being quote-unquote professional in appearance and tone and conduct. So really creating an outward image of what this firm is, what a representative of the McKinsey Group would be.
And they're pretty specific, right? And pretty meticulous. One word that you would use in a corporate boardroom to describe this would be granular.
Yeah. So let's talk about some Argyle socks. Who gets to wear them? Who doesn't get to wear them? Argyle. What's your take, Mr. Bower?
Yeah, Mr. Bower once forbade all junior consultants from wearing Argyle socks because he thought they would distract clients. And the firm's consultants were all required to wear fedoras. At this time, they were all, I think, they were all probably dudes until President Kennedy stopped wearing them.
Wow. See, now that, I don't know why it just I do know why. It reminds me of the Peaky Blinders. That's what I'm seeing in my head.
Well, also, this is interesting because it feels like the guy's creating a uniform, right?
Yeah.
He is creating a uniform, not just of fabric, but also of minds. Marvin Bower can be considered the head brand visionary or propagandist, internal propagandist for McKinsey. He's the one who told everybody to start calling it the firm. He established the terminology, jargon, nomenclature, whatever you want to call it, that the employees would use going forward. One example would be that all employees of a certain type were called partners. That was him. It gives everybody some prestige, especially from a client basis. I'm not working with an employee now. I'm not spending millions of dollars on that. I'm working with a partner.
Yeah, it's my partner, man.
Mm-hmm. And additionally, he is responsible for a corporate culture that continues, by all reports, today. You'll hear former McKinsey employees say things like, there are only 3 great institutions remaining in the world, the Marines, the Catholic Church, and McKinsey. And they're serious.
Whoa.
They believe it. Yeah, this kind of loyalty, fervent loyalty and belief in the company is baked into every single employee. He also established a set of rules of engagement and rules of conduct.
And let's just list these off. Consultants should put the interests of clients before McKinsey's revenues. That's a big change. At least if you're a corporation that is for profit, you are basically saying, in a way, the customer is always right in this situation, but in this case, the customer is your partner.
And then he said, of course, omerta, do not discuss client affairs. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
He also said, tell the truth as you see it, even if this means challenging the client's opinion. So let's say that you are working with a large beverage company and they want to make a new kind of product that as a McKinsey partner, it's just not going to work. Then it's your job to, instead of just taking their money, it's your job to tell them that this ranch dressing flavored soda is a terrible idea. But
I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
That is one of the most disgusting things I've heard in a while.
It's also a real thing.
Oh, God.
It's a real thing. So
did you do that in the natural flavorings episode?
No, I went to visit our friends Lauren and Annie over at Savor to do an episode with them about ranch dressing. Okay. So check that out if you are like 40% of the American public, a diehard fan of ranch. 40%.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
My son's in there. I'm not. No, I'm definitely not.
No, me neither. I like my buttermilk and mayonnaise separate.
Oh.
I'm kidding. I mean, that's what it was originally. Anyway, just you could check out that episode. Another example, it's let's say you're a McKinsey partner working for a strongman or dictator in an authoritarian regime, and they say, look, the best way to subjugate this ethnic minority is to, shoot them all. And then you say, no, the best way to subjugate this ethnic minority is to imprison all of them, but call them re-education camps or summer camps. We'll work on the phrasing. That's the stuff you're supposed to do as a McKinsey consultant. You're supposed to stick by what you think is the correct answer, even if your clients, some of whom may be quite dangerous people, will disagree with you. And then they said only perform work that is both necessary and that McKinsey can do well.
Okay. Only stuff that's necessary. I wonder why that one is so important. But I guess that's the idea of we're only going to outwardly show good work. So if we don't know that we can perform this task like to perfection, then we're not even going to attempt it. That way, nothing ever dings our reputation. Yeah.
There's some self-preservation there, right? And it makes sense when you think about it. The idea of only doing work that is necessary also makes sense. It's a matter of professionalism. You're not doing unneeded work and then fining the client or giving them a fee for that. You know what I mean? It's the difference between a good mechanic and an unscrupulous one.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another rule that McKinsey set for itself. They only work with CEOs, and they only work with clients that the firm itself feels will follow the advice of the firm. So they're not trying to get somebody in there that's maybe just wealthy enough but won't actually heed their advice. Again, they're so selective with how they're viewed. I think we keep painting this picture here. And so far, since what was the year? 1926. It's just been working for them.
Yeah, they keep a very, very low profile. They did expand their restriction on CEOs to include CEOs of subsidiaries and divisions of larger companies.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a bigger pool than it was originally, but the changes over the years have not fundamentally changed the rules of engagement or the core values of the company. And as you said, Matt, this has been a winning formula. There was a profile story on McKinsey in 1993. It said McKinsey and Company was, quote, the most well-known, most secretive, most high-priced, most prestigious, most consistently successful, most envied, most trusted, most disliked management consulting firm on earth.
Wow. Love they threw that most disliked in there right at the end. I wonder who dislikes it.
A lot of people. Competitors dislike it. Victims, or I guess you would say unsatisfied clients, right? Or people who, as a result of a project, maybe lost their livelihood.
Yeah. I bet there's some law enforcement agencies that don't like them so much. Just because they're probably so good at, keeping a face on whatever situation is going on.
It's true. But you can't be this large without having critics as well as fans, right? Opponents as well as supporters.
Yeah, according to Business Week, the firm is ridiculed, reviled, and revered depending on one's perspective, which makes complete sense. That's what we're talking about. If you're on the front lines with McKinsey, or rather McKinsey is on your front lines, you're probably liking them a lot. Because it does seem like they're pretty accommodating and are going to get whatever job done you need done.
There's one quote that I kept seeing float around, which said that amidst the leaders of the business world, there was a saying that you can't be fired for hiring McKinsey.
Whoa.
So they also seem to be dependable, at least in certain circles. Let's talk about some of these statistics. They have over 120 offices. They have a force of 14,000 consultants. They've been in business for almost a century now, 90 plus years. And one of the key murky pieces of McKinsey is its alumni, who are a hugely influential force. More current and former Fortune 500 CEOs are alumni of McKinsey than any other company. I think they have the highest chance of becoming CEOs in general. It's like 1 in 690, which sounds like tough odds, but that's a hugely favorable number.
Okay, so two things here. They're being consultants and partners, and then they end up becoming CEOs. That's what we're saying here, of these giant corporations. Okay. We're not talking about like a pod people situation, like CIA infiltration, replacing CEOs with McKinsey, are we?
I don't know. I mean, there is a revolving door argument, but it's not a public-private revolution. It's private-private.
Yeah, it really is. I guess that's true.
But so alumni do also go into public service.
That's what I was going to say, alumni go into public service. But then I do wonder how many public servants end up at the McKinsey Group as like a side gig. But it seems like it would be a very demanding job and not exactly a retirement gig.
It's a pretty rigorous system internally. They have a churn of about 1/5 of their workforce a year because they practice something called up or out, which means that you're either getting promoted or being kicked out.
Dang.
I know. Which is another part that lends to their credibility, right?
Yeah. Okay. No dying on the vine there. Just GTFO. Or you're hired and promoted.
If you search on YouTube now, you'll see a lot of pretty fascinating videos from people who are talking about how to get through the McKinsey hiring process.
Oh, man.
Those are the number one hits, more so than the any idea of a McKinsey cover-up.
First step, hack the person that you're going to be interviewed by.
How do you know they haven't already hacked you? How do you know you weren't already selected? You know what I mean?
Oh, God.
So officially, let's look at their official stance.
Okay.
Officially, McKinsey describes itself as what you said, Matt, a, quote, global management consulting firm that serves a broad mix of private, public, and social sector institutions. So they're active in nonprofits, they're active in private corporations, and they're active in mechanisms of the state. It doesn't make a secret of its alumni actions. It's pretty proud of the work of its former employees.
Yeah, according to its own website, quote, alumni number more than 34,000 and work in virtually every business sector in 120 countries. Through formal events and informal networking, former McKinsey consultants make and sustain professional relationships. This dynamic network is a lasting benefit of a McKinsey career.
So once you're in, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there's another thing that's weird here. The clients were not meant to be recruited in like a cold call situation. As a McKinsey person, you are expected to be active in community events, be on the boards of things, go to religious events and religious services, and informally become friends with people in power, obviously, and then build a relationship from there. So nepotism and informal social relationships are a huge part of the process, of the workflow.
Wow.
Of the management accounting. Yeah.
Do you think we've ever run into somebody from the McKinsey Group?
I have, yeah.
You have? Mm-hmm. At one of these things from your past life?
Mm-hmm.
Or your current life?
So at first glance, McKinsey appears to be a powerful multinational company, right? They have interest in everything from cancer research to nonprofit initiatives, agricultural and stuff, and much, much more. This is not particularly unusual in the modern day. McKinsey is not the only game in town here. But the thing is, critics allege there's much more to McKinsey than its shining public image may lead you to believe.
And we'll learn about that after a quick word from our sponsor.
Our sponsor was the McKinsey Group.
Yeah. This episode of Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is brought to you by The Firm.
Here's where it gets crazy. There's a net of nepotism. That's what we're describing. And much of the criticism concerning McKinsey comes from the activities of its former employees. We mentioned that they have noticeably, significantly higher chance of becoming CEOs of very prestigious companies, but they do end up having their hands in a lot of pots, their fingers in a lot of pies, and most of the time that you hear someone criticizing this organization, they're going to be talking about one of any number of scandals. As we explore this, to be absolutely fair, we have to point out that McKinsey can make an argument where they say, well, this was happening because some member of our company or some group within our company did this, but the company overall did not know about this. We were unaware.
Yeah, when you have all those tendrils, 14,000 of them or so, you it's hard to point the finger, especially if they're a consultant for somebody else.
Right, and that is a valid argument to make. They'll also say that, look, we just advise these clients. We don't decide things for them. And while that is true, it is also true that since for years, McKinsey has either been directly involved in or closely associated with a number of huge scandals. Reuters even described these incidents in Tyre as indicative of not a few bad apples, not a couple of unscrupulous people in the company, but instead as a culture of corruption. So we can look through a few of these, and let's give the bare bones, the 101, because each of these subjects that we're about to mention, each one is the tip of a much larger iceberg, right? And there's a lot going on under the water.
Let's start with South Africa. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Talk about Eskom, the power company that was kind of in dire straits at the time.
Mm-hmm. And Transnet as well. Mm-hmm. So the story starts with the Gupta family, no relation to the former head of McKinsey, a guy who also had the last name Gupta. Totally unrelated. This Gupta family is a wealthy Indian-born South African family who are best known for owning a business empire that spans computer equipment, media, mining, and so on. And it had close ties to Jacob Zuma during his presidency. Here's what happened. They found out the Gupta family had strategically placed corrupt people in various parts of the South African government and in its infrastructure and its utility sectors. And the idea is that McKinsey was complicit in this corruption, and they were using their connection with this family to get consulting contracts from places like Eskom and Transnet. These are state-owned companies. And then they provided they worked with someone called Trillion Capital Partners, TRILLIAN, to provide like $75 million worth of services. And then Trillion got a commission off that for facilitating the business. And then they were found, I don't want to say caught red-handed, but caught pink-handed, light red-handed.
All right.
With in the midst of acts of bribery and corruption and payments to this capital partner. And eventually, South Africa's government in early 2018 found that McKinsey and Trillian had been involved in fraud, theft, corruption, and money laundering. So,
dang.
Yeah, so this is a big time financial crime, right? If it's true. And McKinsey has hired legal teams to defend them. Surprised they can afford a ton of lawyers, right?
I know that when they were first getting in bed with a lot of these companies, specifically with the Eskom one, they were looking at a contract for like $700 million for the firm to come in. And that's just one piece of it, working with the people that the Gupta family was involved with. Like the money that was at stake. When I'm thinking about that, connected up to their values about only doing things that they know they can do and only, telling the client the truth all the time and all this stuff and not putting the money above everything else. This feels like maybe this was a slip up where the money was above everything else.
Is it a thing where it's not about the money, though? It's about sending a message? Because what if they felt it was necessary to purposefully cripple Eskom, which is an electricity provider, and Transnet, which is the rail and pipeline firm? What if they felt it was not only necessary to do that, but what if they felt they could do it well?
Whoa.
You know what I mean?
So there was an even higher level of the playing field that was going on.
Yeah. What if – I don't think they accidentally did this, Matt. At this level, it's a really tall milkshake to say that someone just consistently screwed the pooch multiple times at the perfect time to make things terrible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe that was part of it, but that's just one example, and we could probably do a whole episode on that one. There's also the Galleon insider trading scandal. This is where the different Gupta comes in. So there's a guy named Rajat Gupta who was a former McKinsey senior executive. He was running the ship, no relation again to the Gupta family in South Africa, and a guy named Anil Kumar. These two guys and some others were convicted in a government investigation into insider trading for sharing inside information with a hedge fund owner, the owner of a hedge fund called Galleon Group, a guy named Raj Rajanatram. Although McKinsey itself, the company, was not accused of any wrongdoing, the convictions were incredibly embarrassing for the firm because it prides itself on not telling its clients' business, right? On client confidentiality.
There's a senior partner, Anil Kumar, who described, or he has been described as the protege of Gupta. Mm-hmm. He left the firm after these allegations started surfacing in 2009, and then he ended up pleading guilty in January 2010. And while this guy and some of the other partners had been pitching McKinsey's services, their consulting services, to this Galleon Group, Kumar and this Rajaratnam fellow, they reached a private consulting agreement, which I'm interested in. So just kind of behind closed doors, they reached an agreement that violated McKinsey's policies on confidentiality, which, again, we see them kind of maybe breaking their own rules a little bit. Yeah,
that's the problem.
If they really are breaking the rules.
If they are breaking the rules.
Are the rules just outward facing? I don't know.
So in October of 2011, Gupta was arrested by the FBI on criminal charges of sharing insider information from these confidential board meetings with Rajaratnam. Gupta was convicted in June of 2012 on 4 counts of conspiracy and securities fraud, and then was acquitted on 2 counts. So he did ultimately get found guilty of some stuff. And the big questions here are things like, how aware was McKinsey and Company of this activity?
Yeah.
Were they somehow complicit? Were they was he relying on the network to some degree? The answer is probably yes.
Yeah, I would think so. And it's a weird gray. It's not gray, but it feels like a gray area here, insider trading. This idea that if you have these close connections between the company that is valued at a certain amount that you're betting on is going to increase in value, and then you're a hedge fund owner that is placing those values, and somehow you've got this consultancy group that perhaps touches both things. I don't know, that it puts tremendous power in that third party that has that connection, because if you want to, you can pull those strings, or you can threaten to pull those strings. I don't know that. They just got caught. That's it. They got caught doing what maybe they're kind of set up to do, Ben.
That's the thing. So insider trading is so, at least in our country, here in the United States, insider trading is such a hazy concept.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because it's not you sharing anything necessarily in this setup. In a way, it's a consultancy group. It's a partner that is connected, but really not that connected.
And at this level, the laws are pretty rigorous about this, but they can also be fairly complicated. So insider trading occurs all the time in the United States. For a long time actually, members of the U.S. Congress were not subject to the same insider trading laws that everybody else was, in theory, subject to.
That checks out, man.
Sure.
If you're in the Senate, you got to be able to grease those palms somehow. And if you could do it on your own time, and it's not somebody else greasing your palm. Wait, nope, it is somebody else. Oh, wait, it's corruption. Oh, God. Oh, no.
Some of us are more equal than others, right?
Yeah.
So let's pause here for a word from our sponsor and return to some more tales from the Black Book of the McKinsey Company.
Get ready for Enron. It's coming.
We're back, and how prescient. Yes, you are correct, my friends. Enron. So Enron was the creation of a guy named Jeff Skilling. Jeff Skilling was a McKinsey consultant for 21 years, and when Enron collapsed, he actually went to jail.
Yes, he did.
Relatively rare for a lot of financial crimes. McKinsey reportedly fully endorsed the dubious accounting methods that caused the company to implode in 2001. And Enron reportedly used McKinsey for 20 different projects, and it became a situation where McKinsey consultants would say, you know what, Enron is kind of a sandbox for us. Let's shake things up. Let's roll the dice, make it interesting. Vegas, baby.
Yeah, let's see what we can do, what we can get away with. Does this make money if we just say this or we just do this? It's pretty brilliant. And if you've ever seen the documentary, it's called Enron, the Smartest Guys in the Room. I would recommend it highly. Go check it out if you get a chance. Find it somewhere. Have we done an Enron episode?
I don't know if we have. We've talked about it a lot.
I think it's worth it. Like just taking this, expanding it out into a whole episode, just because there are a lot of details in here about the weirdness that occurred there.
Right. Okay. So just a high level, quick and dirty look at this. Enron was the largest bankruptcy reorganization in American history at its time. It was also called the biggest failure of an audit. The scandal went public in October 2001. Enron was an energy company based in Houston, Texas, and it was formed in 1985.
See, you're doing the whole episode right now. This is a whole episode, Ben.
Yeah, sorry.
This is like the Here Are the Facts section.
Yeah,
I can feel it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people went to jail. It had until until WorldCom went bankrupt the very next year. Enron was the largest corporate bankruptcy in history because I think it was valued at $63.4 billion, and then it all went kaput.
Yeah, just.
So maybe we'll do an Enron episode. Yeah, that should be worth it.
It might be dry. A little bit, but I think we can pull some stuff out of there just from the insanity of our financial systems, like as they work with the energy companies and the actual energy prices and just all of these, the way it's all interconnected.
Right. The way that sometimes to turn a larger profit, we will have tankers of oil waiting just off the coast, right?
Yeah, huge
That's happened
ships
before.
Full of them.
I mean, that's, during the Depression, people were starving to death in urban areas while farmers were just slaughtering pigs wholesale and then throwing milk in a creek in an attempt to raise the prices.
Burn that wheat field, man.
This is the point where a consultant would come in and say, hey, we can improve this workflow.
Oh.
And they might be right. You know what I mean? There's a reason that the consultancy industry exists.
If only the Peaky Blinders, the McKinsey group were around back then. Wait.
Nah. So in 2008, do you remember the financial crisis? 2008?
Oh, do I?
You have a tattoo of it.
Yeah, I really
whole
do.
Thing.
Just everything that happened. And it's crazy because the tattoo, it's just nothing because nothing changed.
It's bleak. I love it. So McKinsey gets accused of being a prime mover in the financial crisis, because they were allegedly promoting the securitization of mortgage assets and asking banks to fund their operations with a lot of debt. And according to their critics, this led to a poisoning of the global financial system and created ultimately that 2008 meltdown. There's a great article on this. There are several great articles on this, but one that will mention the financial crisis in a little bit more detail is McKinsey, How Does It Always Get Away With It, by a guy named Ben Chu, writing for The Independent. And what eventually came out in the wash about this was something incredibly despicable that ties in with their activities with insurance. So McKinsey and Company sold major insurers at places like Allstate a new business model that was designed to turn claims into profits. Their strategy was known as good hands or boxing gloves. And this really came into the public eye during Hurricane Katrina. The idea was that internally, we would aim to make the process of filing for claims too difficult for people who were policyholders and too expensive and time-consuming for lawyers to want to take the case, leaving insurance firms undisputed as they delayed or denied claims. Here's how the model worked. This is incredibly unethical. They would offer a deliberately lower settlement to any policyholder who files a claim, much lower than they're actually entitled to, according to what their insurance agreement is. Mm-hmm. If you accept the lower payment, then boom, your claim is resolved lickety-split. If you say, hey, this says that I'm supposed to have X amount of cash, why did you give me Y amount of money? They will say, if you're denying the settlement, we have to process this claim. And that will be delayed and delayed and delayed forever until the policyholders are finally forced to accept the payment or just give up altogether.
That's brutal.
In addition to this, a guy named Navdeep Arora was convicted for illegally depleting State Farm of over $500,000 over a period of 8 years in cahoots with a State Farm employee. So in addition to creating this model that says, hey, you're an insurance company, don't do your job and try to bilk people out of it and then pay us for telling you to do that, certain employees were also stealing money from the company in addition.
God. No, thank you.
Yeah, no thanks. They've also been associated with pharmaceutical, I don't know if you call them scandals, but controversies. There's a company called Valiant, a Canadian pharmaceutical company that was investigated by the SEC. They've been accused of cooking their books and of using predatory price hikes to boost growth. The Financial Times had an intriguing statement here, Matt. They said Valiant's downfall is not exactly McKinsey's fault, but its fingerprints are everywhere.
Jeez. Okay. Yeah. I mean, what do you do with that?
3 out of 6 of the senior execs were recent McKinsey employees, and the chair of the Talent and Compensation Committee was also an ex-McKinsey.
It feels like McKinsey has this like part-time Upright Citizens Brigade gig where they go around like the TV show, not like just the improv group, where they're just wreaking havoc everywhere and chaos on purpose just to see what they can get away with.
Yeah, it sounds like that. And we have to ask if we're just hearing about the bad cases that made it to court.
We most certainly are.
Sure.
I think that's without a doubt, but the bad cases are pretty bad.
And would the cases that are considered successful for the client and the company be considered successful for other people? Were they publicized? Because this kind of company can do multiple things, but one of the things a consultancy is often going to be associated with is quote-unquote streamlining. Like fire the workforce, pay the upper level management more, or give them a sweetheart golden parachute walk-away deal kind of thing. And their competitors have also complained about unfair business practices. There was a court case in 2018. McKinsey went to court over allegations from competitors that was purposely misleading or misinforming clients by not telling the whole truth, essentially, or as little of the truth as they could get away with, because it wouldn't disclose conflicts, like conflicts of interest.
Yeah, and that's rough.
And this comes into play later. Right. So like if you are, what's the easiest way to put it? Okay, let's say that I'm McKinsey Group and you are a creditor, a financier, and you hire me to bail out, let's say Knoll has a bankrupt headphone company. The headphone mill is in trouble and it's bankrupt. You're in charge of how this bankruptcy happens. You go to me, McKinsey, and say, here's a couple mil, here's a cool few mil. What's the best way to restructure this? How do we determine who gets paid what? And I say, all right, I've got the perfect plan. But I don't tell you that as you and I were cracking this deal, I went through a different company and bought up a ton of this debt. So now what I'm doing is saying, well, you got to pay
that
not been incorporated first. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And then so like, okay, well, you're the expert. And so you pay not been incorporated first. Then on top of that cool mill, I've got all this other money with, you know, that's a very, very, very oversimplified version of how that kind of thing would work. It's also illegal.
Man.
And you can see why.
Yeah.
Right?
It is. I'm just having this thought here. This is such a rich person's thing. This idea of a consultant in this way, this type of partner. And that's why it exists at these higher levels with only CEOs, only the top levels of the white collar amongst the world here, of paying somebody a lot of money to figure out how you need to structure your payments for something. Mm-hmm. Because you've got this massive amount of money that needs to go out in these different places. You've got this massive amount of money that needs to be shuttled along in some way. But I don't have time for that. With all this money, I'm going to bring somebody else in to do it. And no wonder like corruption, even just to the amount we're discussing here, occurs. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about that level of money, my God, somebody is going to think about themselves.
And again, this is a huge company. So
yeah,
in their defense, they're saying, well, look, if something happens and it's illegal or it's incorrect, then we will fix it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Not speaking against the company. I'm just saying that is human nature when you're dealing with this kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So just for an example, they said that they wanted to they overhauled their South Africa office, apparently, after dealing such debilitating damage to Eskom and Transnet. And then the stories continued. So in the case of the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, McKinsey stopped working with them after it was disclosed the firm had done more than $20 million worth of consulting work for the agency. And this is where we hear an explicit version of that defense. A managing partner said the contract, which was not widely known until the New York Times reported it to people in the company itself, according to them.
Whoa.
He said it had rightly raised concerns, so they're not going to do it anymore.
That is odd for ICE to be having a relationship with McKinsey. Why?
Is it?
Why? PR? They're not a PR firm.
It could be workflow.
I guess so.
It could be something along the lines of how do we move the most people? How do we
that's interesting.
Like monitoring of a border or something. Or what is our process for it could be something as innocuous as how do we handle records? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
any number of things it could be.
And just setting up facilities, that kind of thing. I wonder if that had anything to do with it. Interesting.
So one other one that we would be remiss if we didn't touch on is McKinsey's work with authoritarian regimes. Their business and policy support for regimes comes in the news every so often. And again, longtime listeners, you'll recall that regime is the word people use instead of government when they don't want you to think another country's government is legitimate.
Yeah.
So North Korea calls the U.S. government the U.S. regime, and the U.S. calls North Korea the North Korean regime.
Absolutely.
So if you ever want to know how your country feels about another country, just see who they call a regime. It is such a simplistic shortcut, but I guarantee you it works.
It's very true. And now I'm seeing it in my head. Oh, God.
It doesn't mean those countries are automatically illegitimate.
No,
it's just
no.
like you know how your rulers feel about them. The Iranian regime.
For sure.
Right? These are the phrases that get thrown around, and I'm sure there's plenty of we were always at war with East Asia kind of stuff going on there too. But in McKinsey's case, they popped up in the news quite recently in December of 2018 because there was this big company retreat in China, and it was held next to the Chinese government internment camps where thousands of Uyghurs are being detained as we speak. And we did an episode on this earlier in modern concentration camps.
Yeah, that's an odd place to have your lavish retreat.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and we also have a list here of, I guess, some prominent clients that McKinsey's worked for. Let's see, the Saudi Arabia regime. No, I'm just kidding. It's the monarchy there. Turkey's autocratic leader, Erdogan. And let's see, the president of Ukraine who was ousted. It's a former president, Viktor Yanukovych, I believe. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yanukovych, that's it. And then several other Chinese and Russian companies who are under or were under sanctions, heavy sanctions at the time. So McKinsey just swoops in and says, you guys need some help. Well, guess what? This hand, it's very helpful.
Mm-hmm. And don't worry, it doesn't know what the left hand does, right?
Or at least it doesn't talk to the left hand.
Omerta, my friends. Yeah, so...
Unless it's trading. If it's a trading thing, then we can make something happen.
Right. So what we're exploring then, or what we have explored today, is the story of a company that operates largely out of the headlines, the halls of power. It's a power behind the throne, sort of this corporate vizier that advises companies, corporations, countries in power. And many times it comes into conflict with the law, with various countries' legal systems. So the question is, are we seeing just the bad stuff? Are we only hearing about McKinsey when there's a problem? Well, we are hearing a lot about McKinsey's problems when they pop up, and there does seem to be a pattern. Are we being unfair when we say that this organization is committing crime? Or are journalists being unfair when they say that? We'd like to hear from you, so let us know what you think of this. In the meantime, for conclusions, McKinsey is not going away anytime soon. We are not kicking someone while they're down.
No.
In any way. And from their perspective, again, they don't actually do these things. They advise clients. The clients take it from there. But not everyone's buying this. One last note, in January of 2019, this month, a bankruptcy case just got reopened here in the U.S., alleging McKinsey was illegally making money off bankruptcy cases it became involved with, and more so that it has established a pattern of doing this, that this is not a one-off thing, but something more akin to a business practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just putting this out here. This whole story reminds me of a movie that I saw way back, well, when I say way back in the day, over 10 years ago, called Michael Clayton, that it stars, I want to say, George Clooney, and, oh God, I can't remember. I think Tilda Swinton's in it too. It's this fantastic movie where there's this, what they called a fixer would come through. And that's what this whole thing feels like to me. Fixers. That's what it is, I think. In my head, that's how I'm choosing to view McKinsey, which I'm sure is just a shallow view of what it is and what it actually is. But that's what it feels like to me. And I wonder if you feel that same way.
Let us know, yeah. And also, consultant firms aren't inherently bad, right?
No, you're just getting something done efficiently. I think that's it.
Well, you're getting someone's opinion.
Yeah.
That's what a consultant, like, here's my opinion based on my experience. This is what I advise, right? And plenty of people have done consulting work before. I've done it, not on this level, but I just want to emphasize that we're not saying all these firms are terrible. We're not saying that everyone involved is a bad guy, but we are saying that McKinsey has a lot of stuff they don't want you to know. And it goes way beyond just who their clients are and what they do for those clients. It goes into court cases. It goes into collapsing state sector industries. It goes into tons of dirty money. And this is, at that point, those statements are not our opinion. They're the opinion of legal systems, of courts. So it's not even us saying it at this point. You know what I mean?
No. All right. Well, hey, find us.
Yeah.
On social media.
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Meet your fellow listeners and talk about McKinsey Group until they buy our corporation to shut us down.
Oh, God.
Here's where it gets crazy. That's our community page on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. I'm at Ben Bolin.
Ben, that's not a fedora, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Just making sure.
And these are not Argyle socks.
Okay, good.
These are my space socks.
Oh, those are awesome, dude. I just have boring ones on right now. Those are awesome socks,
that makes you a better consultant.
I'm not distracting you.
This is where we find out that Paul Decant works for McKinsey.
Oh, I could totally see Paul.
I could see him doing it.
Oh man, he cleans up so nicely, and he's just rolling under the radar when he's in here as mission control.
I could see him doing a great job with it too. Oh, also, this has nothing to do with anything other than maybe ending on a little bit of a lighter note. Paul, I don't know how you're going to feel about this, and fellow listeners, you haven't heard Paul on the air, but I was watching stand-up from one of my favorite comics, John Mulaney.
I thought Mulaney as you said that.
And super producer Paul Decant, you remind me of John Mulaney in the coolest way.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. I could see Paul telling some of those stories.
Oh man, I hope you grow up to be like his character that he played on the Broadway show that he did. I hope you come into that one day.
I don't, but you're not making the decision for him. You're advising him, right?
That's true.
So if anything goes wrong with that, it's not your fault, Matt and Co. So thank you so much for tuning in. Please do let us know what your take is on these things. Are these companies something that should be in the world? Are they criminal organizations, or are the opponents and critics just being alarmist? There's definitely stuff they don't want you to know. And everything indicates that several of those secrets are secrets because they are illegal activity. But again, a few bad apples, or is it a whole bad orchard? I don't know.
You can always argue the bad apple thing in almost every situation.
And you can call us directly with your take.
1-833-STDWYTK. That's stuff they don't want you to know, by the way, in letters. So call us, leave a message. You may get on the show. Okay, I guess that's it. And if you don't want to do any of those things, send us a good old-fashioned email. We are
conspiracy@howstuffworks.com.